For my first presentation, I decided to go with do video games promote violent behavior in students? I'll try to do this in one shot. And I made a PowerPoint slide, so I'll go ahead and I guess that was okay. I didn't see any rules against that, so I'll try to put the link for that on there. So the summary I came up with was video game violence, or VVG, is ranked with risk factors for physical health similar to the effects of secondhand smoke, asbestos, lead exposure, low IQ, and substance abuse. I'm not sure why the book would try to categorize that in the same thing, because I don't agree with that at all, but they did. They listed that in the same paragraph. There's many arguments circling this topic, and many mental and physical health organizations are quick to label VVG as an issue that grow acts of aggression. And ultimately, the meta-analysis experts suggest that VVGs increase aggressive thoughts, angry feelings, and aggressive behaviors alongside decreased empathic feelings, which I also do not agree with. But because a lot of these arguments that I researched, they're all old. Like, this has been an argument around for decades. Some of the highlights. Effects of violent video games have a weaker effect on serious acts of aggression rather than on serious acts. Violence typically results from a combination of multiple risk factors. And that was something that the book talked about a lot, was, you know, it's kind of hard to test this because there's so many things involved with violent crimes and violence in students. You don't know what somebody is going through. You can't just solely blame a video game for somebody, you know, knocking a hole in a window or something. VVGs have become more popular all over the world, but most industrialized nations have seen violent crimes among youths drop to lows unseen since the 1960s. And, you know, it kind of reminds me, like, media and news outlets are always looking for an easy out. It's really easy to blame a book, a game, or a movie. You know, people want to blame something. So, my own reflection. So the arguments I read from the book seemed like they were kind of everywhere. There was two sides, and they were doing their own independent research, and I kind of feel like they made decent arguments, but like at the very end, it's like, well, there's not enough data. The tests are, you know, not accurate. I'm like, well, try again, I suppose. So there weren't any clear answers to the questions we wanted to hear until the summaries, and even then, the answers they gave was like really brief. I felt as if they tried to find linking factors to violence through games, but came up short. So they started giving reasons why games are bad for children. And like I said before, the argument's been around for decades. It's super subjective. And I've seen enough video games, and it's never changed the way I felt about it. It's never influenced my emotions, but that's my own personal feeling about it. And I've seen people get mad at games, but that doesn't mean they're going to go, you know, rob somebody just because they did it in a game. You know, you got to be able to separate reality and fantasy. And maybe there's some people who have a hard time doing that, but still yet. Current related issues that I found on the internet. And the book actually talked about this a little bit too. The American Psychological Association. They listed them and like five other American associations, and they were all on the bandwagon of, you know, being against violent games. You know, they all kind of had the same opinion. But they actually created their own page of myths and facts, and I'll have a link for that too. I also went to the Dana organization, They said that studies like this are difficult since it requires a large amount of children to accomplish this. They say it makes sense that violent video games would cause increased violence, but there isn't any clear evidence to support their assumptions. And I can agree with that. So in 2017, the APA Task Force on Violent Media concluded that violent video game exposure was linked to increased aggressive behaviors. They also thought that it led to decreased empathy. However, it was not clear whether violent video game exposure was linked to criminality or delinquency. So it kind of touches back like they're not sure. You know, they don't know. And that was kind of the ending to every post that I went to, every site that I went to, even in our book, they're not clear. They don't know. And one last thing. Everything that I researched seemed to be, it kept producing the same results. Like I said, I've probably mentioned this before, but I talked about the organizations, but they were the quickest to pass blame on games. It was an easy explanation to the masses. It's easier to it's so much easier to tell mothers that their children are horrible, and only because they spend too much time on video games. I've even heard that from my own mom. My mom, she used to think the same thing, and I think some people are more influenced than others, you know, when it comes to, you know, passing blame on something like a game. You know, not very open-minded, and it's usually from people who haven't played games, I've noticed. So, and it's not just games either. Music, people blame music and movies, violence and the media on the news. You turn on the news and it's something violent every day. I want to mention again that not one source clearly states evidence why games are to blame for violence. And this seems to be one of the bigger argument points for their opposition. So people who are, you know, opposed to their ideas, they also said the same thing. You know, not enough evidence, not enough evidence. I keep seeing that over and over. But one thing I will say is I also believe that the lack of evidence does not necessarily mean there isn't any reason to think violent video games attribute to a child's personality. You know, games, music, any type of culture, it all kind of wraps itself into developing someone's personality. You know, I like, you know, old music, creepy music, and people would see something like this and think, you know, probably a lot of bad things about me, but it's just a band and it's just music. So, I'll go ahead and try to post this so you guys can see it. I hope you enjoyed it.